Welcome to the Blue 52 show. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get Super Bowl tickets because I spent my life savings on an Eras Tour ticket. Literally one of the worst performances I've ever seen. You win some, you lose some, and then sometimes you lose the Super Bowl.
Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
Alright, welcome into the video, everyone. I hope you're having a fantastic day. My name is Jacob Blue. This is the first official video that's going onto this channel. I'm not going to do a bunch of explaining of who I am and why I'm here. I don't think anyone cares. I don't care to share that right now. I think there's more important things to talk about, like the Super Bowl that's coming up this Sunday. I'm going to be getting into that for a while and just a little bit later. I first want to go over the head coaching carousel and all the changes that have been made there. If you're just here for Super Bowl talk, I understand. I'll leave a time mark on where to skip ahead so you can just go to that. But I do want to go over all the coaching changes we have. I believe there's 6. Yeah, there's 6 head coaching changes throughout the league over the last month or so. For you guys that didn't get a job yet, Bill Belichik won. There was a lot of talk of him going to the Falcons, and I saw it. I do think he would have been helpful for the defense and everything, but I don't necessarily think that's the direction they should have gone. So I'm not crazy high on Bill Belichik. It's not that I don't think he's a legend or anything like that. I don't think that all of his Super Bowls that he's won should be thrown away and he shouldn't get the credit for them or anything like that. But I don't think he's the same guy that he used to be. But more than that, I don't think the league is the same way it used to be. So Bill Belichik not getting a job honestly didn't surprise me that much as it did other people. We're talking about, a different Bill Belichik than from 10 years ago or whatever. So that I understood a lot more. First team I'll go over is Washington. Washington Commanders have signed Dan Quinn as their head coach. I gave all of these head coaching moves letter grades. This is the lowest one with a D. I don't know what Washington's doing. I don't know what they've been doing. Obviously, historically, they've had a lot of problems over the last few years or whatever. It's been a lot. And I think it is time that they kind of take themselves out of the spotlight in terms of what's going on with like the owners and what's going around the locker room and everything like that. So that's one positive thing I see about them signing Dan Quinn. However, in terms of actual football, I'm not in love with it at all. I do think he's a respectable defensive coordinator. He's a respectable defensive mind, and he's done a good amount for Dallas the last couple years, but I don't know what he brings in terms of culture, in terms of locker room fit, and just leading a group of men like this at all. I don't think he's proven that he has that ability particularly, hung down or anything like that. And in terms of just like his play calling and schematics, it's not anything special at all. And this is a team I didn't really suspect going with, a defensive mind at head coach. Honestly, my first thought was don't even hire a head coach. Just bring Eric Bieniemy up to be your head coach from your offensive coordinator position. Let him lead the offense and make the play calls and stuff. And then hire, if you ended up hiring Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator or something, that's perfectly fine too. But yeah, Eric Bieniemy left as well. I don't even know if everyone knows that. They parted ways a few days ago and also hired Cliff Kingsbury as their offensive coordinator. That's a lot to take in. So first of all, one thing I think should be pointed out about Eric Bieniemy is there's a lot of question marks about him and who he is as a person and a coach. Why doesn't he have a head coaching job right now is kind of one of the main questions that gets asked about him. And I think there's reasons for that. I don't know all those reasons. I can't really dive into them in an honest, truthful, reflective manner. But there is clearly something going on. I know he has a past that some people are scared of, coaches and owners are scared to bring in, but it was a while ago. And then there were reports that he wasn't interviewing well. And I understand, but there's still, I feel like, something missing. Maybe not interviewing well means it was a lot worse than we thought. But regardless, he's out of Washington. I don't know where he'll end up. I don't think he's going to get a head coaching job. I think if he was, he would have gotten it already. But with that being said, Dan Quinn is Washington's head coach. You got the number 2 pick. We're kind of guessing Drake May is going to go there. Is that who's going to lead and develop and guide Drake May for the long-term future? I mean, what's their plan with this Dan Quinn hiring? Is this your future? I don't think it is, honestly. And looking at what they did earlier in the year where they traded Chase Young and Montez Sweat, you really put yourself in a rough position that even, let's say Dan Quinn is a top-end defensive mind or whatever. What are you giving him to work with? This defense doesn't have much anyways. And Washington's always kind of been known for having even if they're bad, having a pretty strong defense or whatever. So I don't know what the plan is there. If they're trying to get the defense fixed with bringing in the coach for it, and then maybe they'll draft, work in free agency to fix that. I'm really curious to see what Washington's going to do this next year. And, one thing I didn't mention about Eric Bieniemy is how did he actually do at Washington. I do think he proved himself to be, at the very least, someone that, deserves an offensive coordinator job at minimum. Again, I don't know about head coaching. It just doesn't seem like that's going to happen. But he's put together a pretty good offense over this first year with Washington. And Sam Howell couldn't really get it done. I don't think that's their quarterback of the future. The offense was definitely a letdown at times. But again, it was kind of a similar situation where it's like there's not a lot of weapons to work with. When you don't have a quarterback, it makes it even more difficult. You do have Terry McLaurin, and been hoping and waiting for them to use Jahan Dotson and Diami Brown a little bit better and a little more often, but they haven't been able to do that. I think that's something they're going to be able to do, hopefully in the future, especially if they get some more pieces around in this offense. If they do draft Drake May at number 2 and make him their quarterback, it could be hit or miss at this point. And like I said, Cliff Kingsbury's the new offense coordinator. A lot of people have been talking about this guy. And I'm in the same camp of, I don't know what this guy has done to keep earning jobs. I remember him over the last few years as being, this genius offensive mind or whatever, but he's been unsuccessful everywhere he's been. I think there's a chance that maybe as just an offensive coordinator again, he'll maybe be able to pull something out that'll work better for this offense, but in general, I just don't know if he has a position as a coach in the NFL. I mean, he does, clearly. He keeps getting, jobs handed to him like it's service on Sunday with the wine and bread, but not sure what Cliff Kingsbury's doing, what his potion, his magic is, but he keeps getting jobs. So like I said, that with Dan Quinn going to Washington, I give that a D. Next up is Seattle with Mike Macdonald. I think when all of the coaches were kind of moving around and we were like, hey, these are the guys that are probably going to leave and go become head coach somewhere else. To me, the top 2 guys, and it was cool because one was offense and one was defense, but it was Ben Johnson and Mike Macdonald were the 2 top coordinators to become your head coach. If I was Seattle, I'm looking at both sides of offense and defense and thinking we've got the roster on this whole team, if we can plug a few extra holes or whatever, to be really good on either side. And I was thinking it was tough for the Seattle Seahawks when it was time to go find their new head coach. What do we want to look at? Where do we want to go? Do we want the defensive mind? Do we want the offensive mind? What's going to be better in the long run? Because we've got weapons all across on both sides of the ball. And they chose defense. And I don't necessarily blame them. I do have questions about what the offensive plan is right now. And I'll get into that with some of the coordinators they're talking about. talking about, hiring at the moment, but just in terms of, you know, the offensive plan is right now. And I'll get into that with some of the coordinators they're talking about hiring at the moment, but just in terms of, you know, the offensive plan is right now. And I'll get into that with some of the coordinators they're talking about hiring at the moment, but just in terms of, you know, the offensive plan is right now. And I'll get into that with some of the coordinators they're talking about hiring at the moment, but that roster offense in general as well. I don't know what kind of hand Mike Macdonald's going to play into the offense at all. I don't think he has a lot of experience there. I know that's not his strong suit, and it does concern me a little bit that they're saying like, well, we have, Gino and DK and Lockett, JSN and everything. They'll be fine. We'll have a decent enough coordinator to come in and do that, or hire Shane Waldron, which would be devastating, I think. I have a friend who's a Seahawks fan, and I don't think there's anyone he despises more on this planet than Shane Waldron. But Mike Macdonald brings a lot to this team and a lot to this defense. I do think this next year we're going to see a very electric top-end defense. Like I said, all the pieces are there. If they draft with their first pick, if they take like Jared Verse or something like that, take like a hardcore edge rusher, get something on the defensive line, because that's what their biggest need is. They don't need to draft another corner or anything like that. So if they do go defense in the draft, it's going to be an edge rusher or defensive tackle of some sorts. I'm really excited to see what Mike Macdonald does with Devin Witherspoon. The last year, was he the 4th pick or 5th or something like that? He had a defensive rookie of the year kind of year, and he showed that he's not just like a cornerback or an outside guy. He is a defensive weapon you can use in a lot of different places. And looking at how Mike McDonald, why am I saying 4 different names? How Mike Macdonald handled the defensive scheme for the Ravens, seeing that get applied to the Seahawks is going to be just bread and butter. I think the roster on the Seahawks defense is even better than the Ravens, if I'm being honest. I think a lot of the reason, and I'm not taking credit away from them or saying that they're going to fall off a cliff or anything like that, but a big reason this Ravens defense was so dominant this year is because of Mike Macdonald. And as, the more games you watch of the Ravens throughout the season, you really start to notice that, really start to see like, oh, these guys are getting schemed open the same way that like a receiver would on offense. Like, yeah, that was a good cornerback blitz or whatever, but he had a completely free lane to the quarterback to make the sack. You look at guys on the Seahawks defense like Jamal Adams as well, Devin Witherspoon, even Tariq Woolen, who I think is, usually they just try to keep him at corner a little bit, but with his size and athleticism, Lord knows what Mike Macdonald's going to come up with. Again, like I mentioned, the offensive plan has some questions, so what I found is some of the top coordinators that are being talked about for taking this position. The first one is Ryan Grubb from Washington. So Ryan Grubb was Kalen DeBoer's offensive coordinator at Washington, the college. Washington that made the national championship this year and lost. Boo-hoo. But he actually had intended to follow Kalen DeBoer to Alabama and be their offensive coordinator. There are some reports right now that the Seahawks have also been talking to him and that he is seriously considering that job. As far as I've seen at the time of me recording this, which is February 7th, I haven't seen anything saying the Seahawks have made any specific moves or Ryan Grubb has, but I don't know if that's my first pick exactly, but I like that fit. I like, looking at how Michael Penix Jr. was used this year, even though college is completely different from the NFL, but how he was used this year, I think that would be beneficial bringing that over to Geno Smith. And this offense has a lot to work with, like I mentioned earlier, with DK and JSN. Maybe they'll find a way to get Noah Fant involved a little more. I know in this draft they're going to go to the trenches, either offense or defensive line, whatever it is. That's probably where they're going to look at. I don't mind the fit of Ryan Grubb. Also, Mike Kafka from the Giants, I've kind of put as that number. I'd say he's actually third. Not a lot to say on Mike Kafka. I know you're hearing a coordinator from the Giants. That's the last person you want, but you got to keep in mind the Giants haven't had a quarterback, and the offensive weapons have not been great. The fact that that team was able to be rostered and not get absolutely obliterated every single play on offense. Was crazy. And I mean, you can look at a guy like Mike Kafka as the help for that. Then Tanner Angstrad from Detroit, coordinator from there. I like that fit a lot as well. I think that's kind of my number 2 guy who I could see going to Seattle. I don't know if he'll leave Detroit, but if he'll be willing to, because like we saw Ben Johnson pull out. So Tanner Angstrad might be in a similar position. And then, of course, they could re-sign and stick with Shane Waldron, who's been there forever and has been pretty average. If I was a Seahawks fan, I'd also want Shane Waldron to go. There's no point in getting rid of Pete Carroll to make changes for things if we're going to keep a bunch of everything else the same. And right now, looking at this roster, I think you want to keep a lot of the pieces that are on this roster for right now. But I don't know how concerned they are with moving everything else other than like positional coaches, head coaches, and coordinators and stuff like that. I think that's where the brunt of the changes are going to be for the Seahawks over the next couple years. Well, at this point, they don't need to make a lot of changes because they're doing that now, but you see my point. Next is in Atlanta. We had Raheem Morris head over there from the Chargers. Nope, from the Rams. Yeah, from the Rams. Also, I forgot to mention the Seattle. I gave a grade for them getting Mike Macdonald. Gave that an A. Only reason it's not an A+ is just like, again, a little bit of questions about what you're going to do offensively. But I don't regret them hiring him because he doesn't come with all the best offensive scheming and planning that you could come up with in the world. But it is something to look at. He's not a completely well-rounded guy, and he doesn't have experience as a leader like that. This is his first head coaching job, so I expect it to go well. A is, I mean, that's as good as it gets other than A+. And like I was saying, Atlanta with Raheem Morris, I mentioned this earlier, I understand this a lot more over Bill Belichick. I think bringing in a young guy like this, he's got experience kind of in a bunch of different places. He also already has experience as a head coach for the Falcons when he was an interim, and I believe for Washington he was just in general as well. But with that being said, he has experience as a head coach and an offensive coordinator, or not an offensive coordinator, but being on the offensive side of things, helping coordinate. I think he was a receivers coach or a quarterbacks coach, one of those two. I like this fit enough. I was really hoping an incredible offensive mind could come into this Atlanta team and finally find a way to use Bijan and Kyle Pitts and Drake London and everyone they've been drafting with their top 10 picks every year the last few or so years. I'm still a huge believer in Bijan as well, and I'd really like to see him work out on this team. I saw one person I follow a lot on YouTube, that franchise guy, said that Bijan Robinson has he said this before this season, but he said that he had a better chance of getting 2,000 total yards than he did getting 1,000. That ended up being a lie. But I fell into that same belief, and I still hold that belief. I still hold the fact that if Bijan gets used correctly and the team does pretty well, there's a quarterback on this team. I think Bijan is going to be one of the best players in the NFL. So if Raheem Morris can figure out how to make that work, I'm all in. And then also, what's the plan at quarterback for the Falcons? A lot of talks of them getting Justin Fields. I'm a fan of that. I think that would work out great for both sides. I don't think Justin Fields I don't think he doesn't deserve a spot on an NFL roster at this point or anything like that. He didn't play like that. I do think the situation the Bears are in, it makes a million times more sense for them to take Caleb Williams in the draft. But Justin Fields is still an excellent player, and I think he's a hell of a lot better than Desmond Ridder. I do not want to see that man play football anymore. I have nothing against him personally. He seems like a great guy. I think that's part of the reason people were kind of like accepting and open of him becoming the starting quarterback. It's just like, well, he's a good worker, he's a good leader, he's gonna put the effort in and everything, and I believe he has, but I think he has limitations, and it's gonna be a much better day when he's not the starting quarterback for the Falcons anymore. That leaves the Atlanta Falcons with a B minus grade for receiving Raheem Morris out of all of this head coaching chaos. Then Carolina with Dave Canales. This is huge for Bryce Young. This is a really big deal. I'm a big believer in Dave Canales. I'm a really big fan of him. He was a coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks in Geno's first year, and then he's been over at Tampa Bay this last year. So within recent years, we've seen him do very well on two teams, two offenses where he didn't have a lot to work with. Geno's first year, you have DK and you have Tyler Lockett and everything. That's great, but that wasn't an awesome offense that was rostered together or anything like that. And JSN wasn't there. Didn't really know what we were going to get out of Geno. I think a big reason why Geno did show that he is still capable of starting in this league is, he can thank Dave Canales for that. And then heading over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, going to the playoffs and winning a playoff game against the Eagles was huge for him. I had no questions in my mind he was going to get a head coaching job. He was really close to it last year. And then I think, with his age and just not having all the experience in the world, not a lot of years showing what he can do, going to Tampa Bay and winning a playoff game was huge. So I love how he's going to help develop Bryce Young. One other thing I think that this really improves for Carolina as a whole isn't necessarily that Dave Canales is a positive in this regard. I think that Frank Reich is a negative in this regard, and that's the offensive line play. I don't know what it is exactly, but it feels like everywhere Frank Reich goes, he's got a problem with the offensive line. And I don't think that the general managers have put together a terrible offensive line for Bryce Young or anything like that at all. I think it's the development and scheme of it that's really set them back. There's definitely some holes and gaps and everything, but I was looking at this team, looking at this offense before the season started, and I wasn't thinking this was going to be the number one worst team in the league. When I said number one, I was meaning to say have the number one pick, but they don't even have that, unfortunately for them. But what they do have now is Dave Canales, and I think they can look to him as their future. I really hope this offensive line gets shaped up, and I really hope that they find someone in the second round of the draft, probably at receiver, to help them out. Xavier Legette would be awesome there. I think they really need a separator, so maybe someone like Xavier Worthy might be a little bit better. Thinking, they have the 33rd pick. There's not going to be a whole lot there. They're probably going to look more towards separator, whoever's a better separator that's left there. So I don't know who it's going to be yet. I haven't had a 2-round mock draft in a minute, so don't really have that in mind, but good for the Carolina getting Dave Canales. I give that an A-. I don't know if everyone else shared that opinion. I'm really glad, Bill Belichik didn't go there or whatever, or someone stupid like Dan Quinn. Not trying to call Dan Quinn stupid for no reason, but it would have been stupid for Carolina to go get Dan Quinn. Instead, they get Dave Canales. Chargers, Jim Harbaugh. This was the most notable one. This was the big one. And as far as I've seen, this is super positively seen all around the league, everywhere. I don't disagree with that. I'll say right now, his grade is an A- that I gave for the Chargers for getting Jim Harbaugh. I have some concerns, and those concerns start with Urban Meyer and Cliff Kingsbury and other coaches that have tried to, go from college head coach to the NFL. Now, there's other coordinators in the league right now that started out as a quarterback's coach in college and maybe was a coordinator, and then they went to the NFL, coordinated, and then became a head coach or whatever, yada, yada. To me, there's a difference between that, because that's more of a free slate of a person. Usually the person I just described, they're usually younger in this league when that's the case. But when you have someone like Jim Harbaugh, who's been in college for so long, and I know he was in the NFL, and it wasn't even that long ago or whatever, but I don't want to say dominated, but he did just win a national championship, and Michigan's been a very good team for a long time. So even though he did just have success in college. It's not the same game. So I guess the reason it's A minus is more because of the unknowns. Not a lot of tangible stuff I can say, like, here's evidence that it won't work out. It's more like, let's just be careful. Let's press the brakes on the Super Bowl talk for the Chargers and all that for right now. See how these first few weeks of the season go. What ways does Jim Harbaugh connect to the NFL and players positively, and what's negative? If there isn't really much negative, then I imagine it's going to work out great. We've seen plenty of other head coaches that, spent most of their time in the NFL and got a head coaching job, and it didn't work out either. Namely Josh McDaniels is one of the more recent ones that comes to mind. That was just an absolute failure. And Frank Reich for Carolina, but his story is a little bit different. So that's how I feel about Jim Harbaugh. I think the Chargers are going to be a better team this next year than they were last. And one of the reasons for that is going to be that Justin Herbert's going to be back, and hopefully he doesn't get hurt again or anything like that. But, even when they did have him, this team was struggling like crazy. But they'll get a couple guys back from injury, Mike Williams too. I don't know what his contract situation is like, but I think on offense they're going to figure things out. And then on defense, I believe they're probably going to get themselves another edge rusher or a cornerback or something and make this defense special. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to be a great defensive mind in the NFL. I think there's definitely a connect there between college and NFL defenses, probably better than there is between offenses in college and NFL offenses. But most teams in the NFL are like, or at least a lot of them, a lot of coordinators are working off of like Nick Saban's system on defense, and he's had a bigger effect on football than people realize. I think every time I'm going on a tangent about Nick Saban now, I just miss him so much. But every time someone thinks about Nick Saban, I think they exclusively think about, him screaming and yelling at people, and he's a culture guy, and he's all about the process and hard work and everything. People don't realize that he has set a standard for defensive schematics and gameplay for a very long time, stuff that still gets used. So, again, that was just a little tangent about Nick Saban, but the point of that is Jim Harbaugh, I think, can provide something similar. Michigan's defense has been rock solid for a long time now. They've been really good on defense, especially with that front 6 to 8 or whatever, however they want to play their system. So A minus for Jim Harbaugh to the Chargers. And then Tennessee, this is one I kind of know the least about. This one's the least exciting. I think it was more exciting or mention worthy what happened with the former head coach, Mike Vrabel. I wasn't expecting them to just fire Vrabel, and they did just fire him. They got Brian Callahan from the Bengals, offensive coordinator from there. I don't mind it. I think Brian Callahan is a solid coordinator. I do have questions about, kind of in the similar vein of like Frank Reich, how is he going to handle the offensive line? And, I was looking into him a little bit. This is one of the guys I knew probably the least about. And he has some history and connections with offensive line work and play. I think his dad was an offensive line coach or something like that. But regardless, he's also had teams that didn't have good offensive line. He has experience there. And looking at the Bengals the last couple of years, that's been a big issue for them. And that's a big issue for Tennessee. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize, is sometimes you can put together a good group of offensive linemen, but because of the coordinator, because of how things are taught, because of the offensive line scheme, it's not, the offensive and defensive line isn't just big dudes butting into each other. There's just as much of schematics and stuff involved into that and play calling than anything else. So I hope they bring someone in that can help with the Tennessee Titans offensive line. That's a big problem for them. And honestly, I bring up offensive line play so much, and I'm going to be bringing it up in so many different videos and talking about different teams, but I think that's where so much starts, so much success starts, and that's where failure starts too, is where's your offensive line play at. And then Also, with Brian Callahan, he does have quite a bit of experience with, NFL and coaching greatness and stuff. He was on that Broncos winning team with Peyton Manning, and he had one more. I think he worked with Detroit for a little while. I'll have to look that up maybe. Not important. But the Brian Callahan signing, I gave a B-. It's kind of an unfair grade a little bit because, like I said, I didn't know too much about him. But I did my research on him for the most part, and I think it's going to turn out okay, and I didn't see a bunch of other people freaking out about it, so I'm fine with it. Right now, for the main event, the Super Bowl talk, for those of you that stuck around, the head coaching talk and the carousel and stuff, thank you. If you did not, I get it. I skim through videos and stuff all the time as well. The first thing I want to say for the Super Bowl is... originally, I had intended my first video to get posted a little while ago, right before the conference games with the Ravens, Chiefs, 49ers, Lions. I made a video talking about that before it happened and talking about different key matchups and stuff, and I brought up a lot of the stats that all the teams have had throughout the year and where they've been efficient, this and that, and I was heading into this week ready to do that again for the Super Bowl. And it just didn't seem important at this point. And I think that's pretty usual, but this year especially with these two teams where and I'll talk about this a little bit more in a second, but where I'm looking at the Chiefs and thinking like, there isn't a lot that I'm looking at on paper and saying like, this is what's going to, this is why they're going to shut them out, or anything with the 49ers particularly. I mean, fantastic players on both sides of the ball. The main things with the Chiefs is just that they manage to win so often and no one can stop Patrick Mahomes. And the 49ers just have this dominant feeling about them. So it doesn't make sense for me to just pull out a bunch of stats from 12 weeks ago about EPA, the per play, average yard, whatever it is. It doesn't seem as important. There's definitely still some key matchups and points I want to make. Also going into this, some of the injuries that we're talking about for both sides of the ball. It looks like Joe Thuney is out. I thought that was going to be a really big deal against the Ravens, and Matabike was going to get after Mahomes. That didn't end up being the case, so it seems like Nick Allegretti held himself strong against that pass rush. Didn't get a lot of pressure on Mahomes. The Ravens didn't. So although they're, would definitely prefer to have Thuney, I think they proved last week they're probably going to be able to make it work without him. But you do got to think this is a different level of pass rush in terms of players that you're dealing with. Now, like I mentioned with Mike Macdonald, he was able to scheme Ravens open all year in terms of like pass rushing and getting after the quarterback and stuff. There's no Mike Macdonald here, and it's not that I don't trust the coordination for whichever side or whatever, but when, we're looking at the Ravens and saying, okay, that guy got schemed open, it didn't really matter that, Nick Allegretti was the right guard or whatever. In this situation, it is going to matter a little bit more who's on the other side or whatever. Because although the 49ers are throwing a bunch of stunts and really good looks at, every offense that they play, they're one of the most stunt-heavy teams in the league. Although that's the case, I think we're looking at different villains and bad guys that this offensive line is going to have to face, and it's not very solid right now. They're dealing with injuries. I'm talking about the Chiefs right now, dealing with injuries and just not a lot of rock-solid guys. These tackles are kind of a concern. I mean, they definitely are against Chase Young and Nick Bosa. That's not the point. I'll get more into the injuries and then get into the matchups and again in a second. But Trent Williams, I don't know what his official report is in terms of injury, but he did not participate in the last practice. I imagine he's going to make it. I think he will, but that does have me a little concerned that if he was not practicing and let's say he is able to play, is he going to be 100% healthy? I mean, I don't think anyone's 100% healthy right now. It's the last, game of the season. Most teams are pretty banged up, but Trent Williams not being there, if he doesn't play, I'm going to be really concerned for this 49ers team. And if he does and he's 75% and he's just a good left tackle, I still have concern there as well. There's, both of these edges are really quick and can really get after it. For the Chiefs. Then Kittle was limited in practice as well. I'm pretty sure he's going to make it, but again, similar question. Maybe he does play, but what if he's not 100%? What if he's, off by quite a bit, and that's someone that's harder to use? I think it was a toe-related injury, so he should be a little bit better off. And Deebo Samuel proved last week he is healthy for the most part, but he is still, got to keep in mind, he is dealing with a little bit of a slightly bum shoulder. And it's not really worth bringing up anyone else that didn't participate or was limited, because like I was just saying, for those guys, no one's 100% at this point in the season. It's just about who you have, actually. So those are a little bit of the concerns there. Like I said, I do want to get into some of the key matchups and points that I have. The first one is whether or not Taylor Swift makes the game. Obviously, that's going to be a big-time game decider. If she isn't there to root Travis Kelce on and pull his britches up, who's going to do it? Next thing is, can anyone on planet do anything to even slow down Patrick Mahomes even a little bit? And this is a question that I've been asking for about 3 years now. And, we've seen him take some losses and stuff. That always happens. But this really does feel like this is just the next Brady or whatever. Like, Brady left, he retired, and we were like, wow, a legend's gone. Oh, but wait, here's another one. I have the personal belief that Patrick Mahomes is the most talented quarterback in all of history and has the best ability. And one of the reasons people don't bring him up right now as saying he's the best quarterback ever is because of the amount of Super Bowls and all the accolades that he doesn't have yet, because, he's 28 compared to Brady, who retired when he was like 40-something. So if Mahomes wins the Super Bowl, are we going to start seeing a lot more people saying that he is the GOAT? I don't know. I think he has a pretty consistent stream of haters, and I'm not particularly rooting on the Chiefs. I'm not rooting on anyone to win this game. I have my predictions on who I think is going to win, but I don't have a horse in this race at all. I just want a good game, and I think that's what everyone wants out of the Super Bowl. So where I stand with Mahomes right now is it's so incredibly tough to doubt anything he does. Every time he's on the football field, he's going to make plays whenever he needs to. He's going to be lucky. I mean, again, that's just another thing. You can't measure that, but it's one of the reasons I struggle so hardly to root against the Chiefs is it's not something I can put on paper or say, he's got this many plays where this happened. It's just this weird factor, this weird thing about him that the universe has given him. And I'm not saying anything about Patrick Mahomes is just all luck or whatever. But so many, time and time again, we see him pull these plays in these scenarios out of his behind to win football games. And I just don't see that stopping this year. I thought they were going to be a first round out or whatever. The Chiefs are a lot weaker this year. This is the year for a lot of other teams in the AFC. But it hasn't really been that way. It's been the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. I'm very high on Patrick Mahomes, and that's not a strong take. I think Patrick Mahomes is a good quarterback. Obviously, he is, but it's when you get a quarterback like this where you have things you can't measure about him, and it just works time and time again, and he seals up these games. And this Chiefs team kind of feels the same way right now. I mean, he's on the team, so of course they're getting some of that effect, but they're just in the right place at the right time, making the plays they need to. There's a lot of concerns I have that I'll get into, but again, those concerns were kind of demolished the last 3 games in the playoffs. So Next point is going on the key matchups is the Chiefs' run defense versus Christian McCaffrey. The Chiefs have not had a strong run defense throughout the season, and in the postseason, it's been, whatever. It hasn't been good either. They got... I don't want to keep saying that the Chiefs are lucky about stuff, but they did in ways get lucky that the Ravens decided not to run the ball, even though it was kind of effective and didn't make sense for them to only run 11 times. I think if the Ravens came in with a better game plan, they could have and probably should have won that game. But regardless, the Chiefs played it perfectly, and they did everything how they were supposed to. What I do worry, though, is we're going to watch this Chiefs run defense that isn't particularly strong, and this late in the year is really beat up and tired, and they're kind of in and out with injuries there. How are they going to handle Christian McCaffrey? And that I don't know. I don't think Christian McCaffrey is going to win this game for the 49ers. But I do think he's going to have a lot of movement on the field. He's going to have a lot of yards, and he's going to score at least a couple times. Regardless of whoever wins, I think no matter what, Christian McCaffrey has a pretty good day. So it's really big for the Chiefs to try to lock that down, although I don't really see it happening. I see CMC getting about 100 yards at least, and 2 touchdowns between the air and ground. And that's kind of like the minimum for yards. He'll probably have like about 100 rushing and then, I don't know, another 40 receiving or something like that, maybe 50. Then another matchup I'm really looking at is Brock Purdy's ability to win in big moments. And I guess that isn't a matchup unless you consider Brock Purdy's ability to win and big moments to kind of be their own thing there. But we've seen Brock Purdy win in big moments and win in the playoffs and stuff. We've also seen him collapse in big moments in this season. They had that 3-game stretch where I would say they collapsed, kind of in a similar way that teams like the Cowboys did. I think the 49ers are a good enough team. They have the roster talent, the ability, the coaching, and everything they need. Obviously, they did at that point to bounce back from that really bad, 3-week stretch that they had earlier in the season. Now, we're in a situation where it's one game. It's one game, and that's all that matters. You can't look at it the same way you did in the regular season where, like, we had a bad 3-week stretch or whatever, but we came back, and now we're in the Super Bowl or everything. No, there isn't that. There isn't, the ability to have a bad 3-week stretch. There isn't even the ability to have a bad 3-drive stretch, a bad 3-play stretch. This is going to have to be one of the most perfect games that the 49ers have played in a while. I know this team and roster is a lot better than the Chiefs is, but based off of last week, what I watched between both teams, I saw a really good 49ers team for sure that was playing a really good Lions team, and it was kind of close. I mean, in the beginning it wasn't close, and then 49ers came back, and then there was blah, 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 all this. And then I saw the Chiefs, who's supposed to be a much worse team, play the Ravens, who was supposed to be the best team. And I know the score was 17-10 or whatever it was, but they manhandled them all day. And they came in with the perfect plan, and they executed it perfectly. And you're able to do that when you have guys like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce that can allow those, game plans to be executed how they're supposed to. We really saw that this last week. And I fully believe the Chiefs are going to bring that again. So if Brock Purdy has a turnover or 2 or whatever, it might just be 1. That might be the game. Because I don't think Mahomes is going to make that kind of mistake. And if he does have a turnover or whatever, I believe in him more to make that up than I believe in Brock Purdy or anyone on the 49ers to make that up, really. And I feel like a lot of people are going to come at me as being, a Patrick Mahomes meat writer and a Brock Purdy hater or anything. I think if you talked to me earlier in this year, you would have felt completely different about things. Last week really opened my eyes to a lot of things, and it wasn't, anything negative on the 49ers. And I've held my belief for Patrick Mahomes being the best quarterback of all time for a little while now, at least, maybe the midway through last year or something like that. I started being like, yeah, that's accurate for sure. Again, just seeing how last week was handled and everything, I think that really kind of solidified that into saying, like, oh, he's not just, like, the best of all time. Like, there's something different about this guy. To the point where, like, yeah, his team is better. It doesn't matter, though, because he's way better than everyone else on your team. And looking at, the coaching staff from the offensive and defensive coordinators, the specific positional coaches and stuff, and then to Andy Reid, one of the best coaching staffs in general in the league. And if they were able to do what they did against the Ravens, I think we're looking at something similar against the 49ers. With that being said, what I was mainly talking about was Brock Purdy's ability in big moments to win in big moments. And why I just went on that rant about the Chiefs and everything is because the whole game is a big moment. And like I was saying earlier, with the bad 3-week stretches, you're not going to get that opportunity. So, if we can keep Brock Purdy, from folding, and look, I know this dude's proven a lot over the last couple years and everything, and I'm as big of a Brock Purdy fan as anyone else in the world, and I do think he's good enough to win a Super Bowl. And also, when I get to my picks, I'll let it be known it's a pick. It's not. I'm not confident in this at all. But regardless, with Brock Purdy, we've never seen him in the Super Bowl. We've never seen him in a moment this big with, no room for error and really no excuse. It's just time to go play ball. And I'll stick with the Brock Purdy theme and talk about his ability to stay upright, especially if we're talking about Trent Williams not being 100% or not playing at all. This offensive line's not very good. It's really just Trent Williams out there. They've done an awesome job of getting the ball out quickly, but if, they're going to come out trying to get the ball out quickly, what's to say the Chiefs aren't just going to be pressing a lot, playing really tight coverage to start, making sure that they have, safeties deep and everything, but keeping a lot of guys drop down and everything, making sure Travis Kelce's locked up, Rashee Rice isn't getting wide open. It's going to be tough getting that ball out quick, and if that pass rush is getting in Brock Purdy's face, it's going to be a long night for everyone in San Francisco. And this one's obvious, going to KC. The receivers, are they going to come in clutch? I don't even think they need to come in clutch. They just need to not fail miserably. One of my big concerns is a few times ago when the Chiefs were in the Super Bowl, they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Throughout that year, the Chiefs looked really good and were playing well, and Patrick Mahomes was this and that and everything. And then they played a team in the Super Bowl that bested them in the trenches. Their defensive line just absolutely dominated their offensive line. And the offensive line was kind of similar, where throughout the year they weren't that solid, and that was kind of the weak point or whatever. But it wasn't that bad. And then, if I remember correctly, they lost a couple guys, and it just all went down the drain. And the Buccaneers had a really, really good pass rush that year, but I'm worried about something similar like that happening this year. They had those issues against Tampa Bay with their offensive line, and we knew that a little bit throughout the year, and then it really got revealed in the Super Bowl. I feel like we're in a similar situation where we're kind of looking at, like, hey, the Chiefs receivers have messed up a few times this year, and it's really costed them, and it's been a big deal. And throughout the playoffs, it's been fine for the most part. I mean, clearly it's been fine. They've won, and they're in the Super Bowl now. Are we going to see a complete come apart like we did when they played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? I don't know. Thinking about what kind of game plan the Chiefs are going to come up with, I don't imagine it's going to be airing it out all over the yard to the receivers. They proved to themselves that's not going to work right now. So I think it's going to be a lot of dunk and dips. I'll get more into what the game plans on each of these teams think is, but the receivers coming in clutch is going to be huge. And like I said, it's not making an OBJ-like catch at the 1 yard line or whatever with 3 guys on your face. It's just making the simple stuff happen, not dropping easy stuff. They need to be consistent, and they need to get the job done in the passing game when they go to it. And the last like matchup, Shanahan versus Reed. This is, I don't think many people know this. I saw a stat on it, but apparently so there's only like 3 or 4 other times in NFL history where 2 head coaches had matched up in the Super Bowl twice. I know that sounds like a dumb ESPN stat, but we talk about rivalries and stuff all the time in sports and football. This is one that doesn't get talked about enough. Kyle Shanahan versus Andy Reid. Have kind of the young buck that's seen as the face of play calling in football nowadays with Kyle Shanahan, but Andy Reid's still really chugging along. He is still, I mean, you can't say they're in a different category. Honestly, if I had my pick, if I was starting a team, who would I want to be my head coach? I'd probably say Shanahan, but do not dismiss Reid. Do not forget about Andy Reid. That's what I'll say, since I can't think of the word I was trying to say. Don't forget about Andy Reid, and realize that I think, not that there's bad blood between these guys, but this is a rivalry, and both of them want it just as much as the other. I really don't believe that the Chiefs are kind of thinking like, well, we've had a few in the last few years, we're kind of tired, so we'll kind of slack off. I bet anyone on that team can attest to you that that's not the vibe at all, and they're just as hungry to get the Super Bowl as they've ever been. And everyone on the 49ers is in a similar boat, and that's why I'm so excited for this one. A couple points I have, not really matchups necessarily. The pressure's on San Francisco. Like I was just saying with KC, they do have a few of those other Super Bowls recently, and they've had their success and everything. They don't have questions with the quarterback or whatever. If Mahomes loses this, no one's like, is Mahomes the long-term plan or whatever? That's not going to be the case at all. If San Francisco loses this, I think, it doesn't bring people's jobs into question necessarily, but it does say like, hey, Brock Purdy didn't get it done. Are you going to stick with him? Are you going to pay him $50 million a year? What's the deal with him now? Wouldn't it be great? I know this bums some people out because they're Brock Purdy haters and they don't have fun in life at all, but wouldn't it be fantastic if the 49ers win the Super Bowl this year? They pay Brock Purdy like $50 million, and he does go from Mr. Irrelevant to the richest man in the league. I mean, that's just the American dream. I know the Mr. Irrelevant stuff has been beating everyone's head on social media for so long now since he started playing well, but regardless, dude's been a dog, and he's an awesome NFL player. I think they're going to have to... a lot of people are talking about what his contract's going to look like and saying it shouldn't be that much. First of all, just because of his level, but also because he's the kind of quarterback that needs a lot of those weapons around him, and you have to pay them as well. But one point I think he's going to use to get a bigger contract, similar one that I think we saw Dak use and people didn't even realize, was, hey, I've been playing the last 3 years, making $800,000 a year, and I think I need to be paid for that as well. I think that's what Brock Purdy's... I don't know exactly what he's going to ask and do. He might just be like, I'm fine with $20 million because I want my guys around or whatever. But a lot of the times when we get into scenarios like this with quarterbacks, we gotta, the quarterback themselves and the team will kind of be forced in taking account for the years that they were playing while they weren't making that much money or whatever. That wasn't the point I was getting on. I was talking about the pressure is on San Francisco, but I think that, it's a big difference between where the pressure is. But I think both teams are fighting just as hard. I think both teams want it just as bad. It's just, is this going to matter to more at the end of the day based off of the implications? I do think it's the 49ers, but yeah, it's not like anyone's getting fired. And another point, the 49ers cannot make mistakes. And this goes for every game. There's a lot of points I make about stuff where I'm like, you could say this for every game, not just football, but every sport or whatever. But there are times where it's very important and it just feels different. And again, I'll mention back at the last few games that we watched with the Chiefs-Ravens game or whatever. Mistakes are what really bit them in the tail. what bit the Ravens in the tail. The Chiefs played just a nearly perfect game all across the board. They were so consistent with moving the ball precisely, not putting it in harm's way, efficiently running it, just efficiently moving down the field in general. And I still think they're going to bring that. They're going to bring that even harder this time around. And like I said earlier, if we get that turnover in a big moment from Purdy, it's probably game over, especially if it's like in the second half. I think that's probably going to be the game. A fumble or something, not converting it on fourth down when you need to or whatever, it's going to really hurt the 49ers, because I think once the Chiefs get the opportunity to get a hand on that clock and choke it down, they're going to take it. They're going to be up by a few points, and they will gladly be up by a few points with rings going on all their fingers by the end of the day. I do, however, think that if the score gets over 30, it's probably going to be towards into the 49ers' favor. 30 is a lot. I would set it at like 20, above 28 or whatever. Just pick 30 as a nice even number. But let's say if the game's more than 4 touchdowns, I think the 49ers just have more weapons to really seal the deal and win it. If it becomes a shootout, which I really don't think it's going to be a slow defensive game for the most part, but it'll be in the 49ers' favor if it does go to blows, I think. And then I'll get into what I think these offenses are going to do in respect to each other, and then along with that, what the defense is going to kind of respond back with. Like I said, with the Chiefs, it's going to be very slow, consistent movement down the field with really short passes, running. They're not going to, put Mahomes in a bunch of situations where he's running around a lot. Get the ball out really quick. A lot of screens, just a lot of seam shooters with Travis Kelce that they do, like really short seams, just kind of in between like the slot guy and the linebacker or whatever. They hit those a lot. And, sometimes they'll kind of come back and sit in it like it's a hitch or whatever, but they're really, I really don't know how many routes Travis Kelce runs a game. I think most of the time they're just like, just go find like space to get open or whatever, and then maybe Mahomes will probably make it work. And we're going to see just as much of that as ever, and with that, a good infusion of run and short pass and everything. They're going to be chewing this clock from the start. They're going to be getting it off the board as quickly as they can. They don't want to be in a situation where they're letting the 49ers get up to that mark I was saying of about 30 points or so, and then the game becomes a shootout. It's going to be a lot of movement, but incrementally down the field for the Chiefs. And also, I think they're going to just have an expectation on Mahomes that he'll need to make plays against pressure when it comes up. The Chiefs are going to avoid letting that happen. Again, that's one of those obvious things, but I do think part of this game plan is going to be slow, consistent movement down the field, running, short passes and everything. But when the play breaks down, that short pass isn't there, we have you rolling out to the flat or whatever, we need you to make a play there. And then the rest of the time, we just want you to dink it down or whatever. But once you're in that situation where you don't have that dink down and we have you rolled out to the flats or anything like that at all, we got to get a play out of you, got to get a first down. And I think Mahomes has the perfect ability to do that. The 49ers, what they'll do on defense, a lot of stunting and mixing up on coverage. They're not going to run the same stuff twice, kind of similar with the Chiefs. You can't at this point in the year. If something works for you, a play or concept or whatever, that's like the last time you get to do it for the most part. But I think the 49ers have a full Santa's bag of different schematics and plays and stuff they can do on defense to hopefully get in the Chiefs or into Patrick Mahomes' face against the Chiefs. And I think one of the big things for them on defense for the 49ers is going to be applying pressure, and it's going to be applying pressure with a lot of stunts, a lot of movement on the line. At this point now, there is some youth there on that offense, and some inexperience or whatever, and I'm looking at, you've got the guard, Nick Allegretti, and then you have both of your tackles who are just okay, and then, there's Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith, who I really like, but a lot of stunting up front. I think we're going to see it. I think we're going to see Nick Bosa shooting right into that A or B gap off of a stun with Javon Hargrave shooting outside, taking a guard or tackle with him or whatever, just mixing it up with the linebacker blitzes and stuff. You've got Greenlaw and Fred Warner. Like, they're going to use them in the blitzing game for sure. And I think that's going to be a big deal for the 49ers on defense, is bringing that pressure through blitzing and through stunting and everything, and then hoping that they have the guys in the secondary to cover those few seconds. We need just like 2.5 seconds of coverage. They're probably going to be pressed up a little bit more and are just going to say, like, hey, we don't want any of those quick dump-offs where he's snapping the ball and just tossing it out or whatever. Just, we need you to jam them and then back up off. Keep an eye on them for that 2.5 seconds, and we're going to work really hard to get Nick Bosa and Chase Young after Patrick Mahomes. I think that if that's kind of the plan they're going with, it's the most like basic logical plan in my opinion of how to attack this Chiefs team. Keep everything, shallow and down on the line of scrimmage, and then gotta mix it up a lot in the pass rush game. And then for the 49ers offense, like I said earlier, it's going to be avoiding mistakes at all costs. And I think they have the team where they don't need to play the same as the Chiefs, where they can be like, yeah, we're going to take our shots when we get them. This Chiefs defense is really good, but I could totally see them going Christian McCaffrey, CMC, with like runs and passes and everything like that, really short, and then taking just a nuke, sending it down to Brandon Ayuk. They've been using a lot of crossers and stuff like that to get deep down the field. I think they'll hit a few of those, and if they get a few of those off, it's going to be a really big deal. If they can score on more possessions than the Chiefs can, they'll win. In case you didn't know, that's how the sport goes and is played. But yeah, if they can move the ball very consistently and avoid those big shots on the field turning into turnovers or whatever, it's going to be awesome. And I'll take some 3rd and outs and punts or whatever. I'll take some of that from the 49ers. I think they're going to be relying a little bit more on having a really solid defense that's going to slow down the Chiefs and everything, and then having an explosive offense that's going to make plays deep down the field for big gains for them. Christian McCaffrey is probably going to break a few. You're going to get George Kittle on a 10-yard dig or whatever, and he's going to come across the middle and no one's going to want to tackle him, and he'll get a big chunk of yards. They've got plenty of different ways to create explosive plays, and doing that without making big mistakes that cost them the game. And one of the last points I made for the 49ers offense was creating explosive plays early and force Mahomes into moving the ball a lot. That's going to be a big deal for the offense. Like I was just saying with these explosive plays, are you going to move along with Mahomes? Or are you going to go down this road with him? Or are you going to force him into the position where he has to do something? If the 49ers are up against the rink for most of the game and they're at a point where like, okay, we got to answer back for what the Chiefs just did, it's going to be really tough. If they can come out really early, really quick and say like, hey, we're here to play. Here's 14 points on the board and first half isn't done or whatever. That's not a crazy amount, but I think in this game it will be. Force the Chiefs where they're playing from behind or whatever, and they have to start deviating a bit from those quick short passes and little seam throws and run a lot of runs and stuff like that. I think you get them in the place that you want. So that's going to be a big deal for them. And then what the Chiefs should or maybe will do against the 49ers team, bringing a lot of pressure to Brock Purdy. His offensive line's in even worse shape than the Chiefs is. And also, you got to consider, like I was saying earlier, that lack of experience and him not being the most explosive athlete in the world. And I think he's proven he's a really good play extender, actually. And he's a pretty decent athlete, so I think that's going to be okay. But They're going to be wanting to get pressure in his face a lot. They're going to have to shut down probably one of these guys, and then they're going to have to not let anyone else on the 49ers offense become the new guy that makes explosive plays. And what I mean by that is, okay, so looking at the 49ers offense, there's George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, Christian McCaffrey. One of those guys has to have like a 1-catch, 7-yard game. We can't have all 4 of those dudes doing their thing. One of them you have to eliminate like right off the bat. I don't mean take his knee out with like a hammer or anything like that. I just mean make sure he's locked up. And then because, we're saying like that probably means that person, whoever it is going to get double covered a little bit more. That leaves the other 3 guys with a little more space, probably more one-on-ones and stuff. And similar to the Chiefs, we're going to have to keep those guys locked down for at least a few seconds to start the play, to not let Brock Purdy have anything quick that he can just get the ball up to. So his number 1 guy is usually going to be someone that he's going to get those, just throw those fades up to. But then, everyone else is kind of like dink, dunk, quick, screen, slant, blah, whatever. If the Chiefs can slow that down, I think it's going to be a big deal for them. Right, and then last thing for the Super Bowl, just went over all of the explosive, the key matchups and important points and stuff like that. Last thing is going to be the betting side of things and my final prediction on how I think the game is going to go score-wise. The point spread is set at -2 at -110 for the 49ers, and then +2 -110 for the Chiefs. Money line is set at -125 for the 49ers, and then +105 for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then the total over-under is 47.5 is where it's set at. I'm going to take the under on that, first of all. And I'm going to take the Chiefs in the point spread, and I'm also going to take the Chiefs to win it. If I have to give a score prediction, I'd probably say 20-24. I think it's going to be pretty low scoring. I think it's going to remain close for the most part. And I believe the Chiefs are going to have a drive to kind of put it away at some point later in the game. This isn't like a reflection on what I want exactly. Like I said, I don't care that much. I'm not a Chiefs fan. I'm not a 49ers fan or a hater, if that's, what people probably are wondering. I like the 49ers. I love Brock Purdy. Love a lot of people involved with this game. I think, they're in the Super Bowl for a reason. These are the best athletes in the league, the best players in the league, and here they are getting to duke it out, and I'm just more excited for anything than that. So let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to be uploading pretty regularly now, probably once a week at this point. Should have 2 to 3 videos up to start, but yeah, awesome. Let me know how you guys think the game is going to go. What are some other important points I didn't bring up? If I got anything wrong, let me know. I got to go over the Super Bowl and the head coaching changes in the league the last little while. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoy the Super Bowl and that goes awesome for you. And, you don't have to be around that one guy that only talks about the Super Bowl commercials and pretends like he doesn't know how football works and then just eats a bunch of snacks. That guy will not be invited to my Super Bowl party. Thank you. Bye.